advocates beside all the programs and UTech toolbox. So what do we have next? I don't see the slide, so stops for me. Yeah, now we're at Technology Forum, Tech Forum. This is a kind of digital platform we are using and we are providing to our advocates to effective and wide range business expansion. So every advocate can create their own company card, and we can just networking between each other. So companies are networking. So we are providing to our advocates huge data of companies, which is over 6,000 companies they can contact from our data. So this is I think a huge value for our advocates. And this is how the summit looks like. Basically, we did last year, we did 5 global exhibitions and summits. This year we did 1. For now, it was My Climate Action Summit, an expo. So we have really huge numbers of visitors, of attendees, really world-class speakers. For example, in my summit, it was like 10 really important topics, like climate action topics, and then 10 panelists. So 10 panel discussions. It was really interesting. And of course, for our advocates, it's for free. They can join the summit. They can be a speaker. So this is also the kind of promotion for them. What we have, this is how you can see that we are providing partnership programs for our advocates, so they can just be a partners of the summits. They can also organize it with us. So we are trying just to help them to show themselves. And we are doing also, we have social media, a lot of information. So weekly newsletters we are sending to our advocates with all the information about the webinars, so they are connected with us, and they have all the information. But if you want to know more about UTech, just join and visit LinkedIn page, and for sure we will get more information about UTech. Thank you very much, and have a great event. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marcin. Once again, hello to everyone. Good morning. I'm really happy to be here with all of you. Today we're going to be talking about clean water, innovation, and tech. And indeed, we have the honor to come with the presence of 3 great panelists with a very experienced background, and they are really an innovative professionals that are trying to make the change in today's world. And of course, they're going to be sharing with all of us their great vision. I would like to invite each one of you to share with us your comments, your questions. You can do that through the public chat that you will find on the left side of your screen. So if you look at that side, you will see the public chat. Just click over it, and you're going to be able to write your questions and comments. Please don't wait till the end of the panel. You can do that since that moment. So please, I really encourage you to share anything that you would like to tell to the panel or to the audience that is with us today. So first of all, I would like to introduce our keynote speaker, Craig Edelplaner. His team and he have developed and proven field and scientifically a significant leap forward in high fine particulate capture filtration technology called additive material. This technology has then been adapted to address the global issue of stormwater contamination. Over 10 years invested, award-winning technology with the ultimate goal being to make rainfall a component of the future water security using the existing stormwater infrastructure. So Craig, I will give you the microphone now. Remember that you have 7 minutes and a half to do your presentation.
Thank you, Maria, and thank you to Nat and Sana, my fellow presenters, and welcome everybody to our conference on water. Look, I'm going to talk today about the three major contaminators of our urban water environments and ocean, which everyone knows is the major producer of oxygen. Man-made contamination is stormwater runoff, agricultural runoff, and wastewater discharge. Now, up until now, these three major contaminators have been completely untreated. Wastewater is the only one that has been treated to a certain extent, but globally we're still pumping 80% of wastewater into the ocean and waterways completely untreated. So what we've done is we have invented a very large leap forward in high flow to find particle capture filtration, which is basically a form of geotextile where I've then adapted this to devices that fit into any stormwater drain, where it captures 90% of or 95% of the waste that enters the drain currently, filters the water down to about an eighth the size of a grain of sand with no possibility of causing flooding. And what that, when you make that disruption at the only entry point into the infrastructure, you can drastically change what's happening at the back end. Now, then I've spent a number of years looking at what is the result of the stormwater drains being open to the elements. And the reality is stormwater contamination is the major cause of urban waterway contamination. It's the major supplier of solid plastics to our water environments. It is providing the ideal mosquito habitat because of the stagnant water it holds. It is also the major cause of flash flooding. And worst of all is that out of all the water sources that humans use, rainwater is free. It falls on our heads and falls into the drains relatively clean, depending on which city you live in, and then becomes a contaminated wastewater by the completely unmaintained infrastructure. Now, we have then had to develop the service model to go with that. And then we've had to change attitudes because councils and municipalities around the world have never dealt with stormwater. They've never had to, it's all been reactive. If there's flooding, they'll send a truck in to vacuum it out, but it doesn't address the problem. It doesn't address the many issues. And with climate change now, rainfall is a lot harder and faster. So the blockages are showing up as flash flooding. The hypernutrient loads that are created in the drain from the rotting vegetation is now driving toxic algal blooms because our receiving water environments have no longer the ability to deal with these huge contamination loads. That's everything from vegetative waste, road base, tire rubber, hydrocarbons, heavy metals, you name it, it all goes down the drain. So we can now disrupt that cycle, and we're now talking to countries all over the world about how we can transform this very big contamination source into a resource, with the ultimate goal being use the existing infrastructure, clean it at source, clean up our waterways, and actually use this water to replenish groundwater. That's my ultimate goal. That's our team's ultimate goal. And we're looking for people who are interested in that sort of a technology. Now, because we have invented and developed this and proven it to the highest scientific steps, which I'm happy to share with anybody if they have any questions on this, it also happens that this technology can be used as a big disruptor in the wastewater industry, because what we're realizing is we need the water, but separating the water from the sludge is proving to be almost impossible with current technologies. We know that we can separate the water post-secondary treatment. That means that that water can now be used for a number of different purposes, and the sludge can go in waste to energy. There is applications in the mining industry for this, sludge dewatering from processing, even right through to rainfall capture, just using the material as a means of capturing rainfall. And we've got some interest in Switzerland on that for the moment for Ukraine, which they're, as we all know, most of their infrastructure is being destroyed or has already been destroyed. So any way to capture water that's falling out of the sky has got to be of benefit. So what we have been doing scientifically is we have spent 10 years proving this technology in the ground. We then, so CSIRO, Chem Centre and Curtin University, which are major entities in Australia, have done all of the science. We won the Chancellor's Award for Science and Engineering in a top global 100 university. Curtin's also just been named the #1 in the mining industry around the world. And look, we're here to make a difference. Looking at other technologies, I do believe that our technology will work in combination with the other emerging technologies, such as Nat's going to talk to you about, removing moisture from the air. And this is what we're all about. So if you've got any questions, my email will be made available. My LinkedIn profile is there. And look, I'd like to now hand over to Nat to do the next presentation. And Maria, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Craig. So as you already say it, indeed, this is the turn for Nat to make his presentation. He's our second keynote speaker. But before giving to him the microphone, I would like to introduce him to the audience. He's a Vietnamese refugee who grew in Lyon, and he graduated at the HEC Louisiana in 2006 before going to Tokyo, where he started working in the web industry and founded his first social business, that is IQ Food, to support victims of the tsunami in 2011. After returning to Switzerland, he founded the Water Inception in 2017, an NPO whose mission is to provide the off-grid water generators that can produce drinkable water from the air to the refugee camps facing water scarcity. He is as well the co-founder of the Happy Turtle Straw in 2019, a social company with the mission to replace all the plastic straws with edible straws made of potatoes, cassava, and rice in order to contribute to the protection of the oceans and endanger the sea turtles around the world. Dear Nat, the microphone is yours, and when you will finish your keynote speech, I will introduce Sana to the audience, okay? Perfect. I already gave you the rights, so you are able to share your screen.
Okay, yes, thank you everyone. Thank you, Maria, for the invitation. Hi, Craig and Sana, and thank you for all the people who took the time to join the webinar. So, as Maria already read, my name is Nat, and my parents, they were refugees from Vietnam. So after the war, they were what we call now boat people. They escaped from the south of Vietnam, and actually I was born in a refugee camp in Malaysia. So the link to the refugees is something I carry since my earliest days. And growing up, there was always something I wanted to do to help them. And in 2017, I came across a video of an inventor, a Spanish inventor called Enrique Vega, who founded a technology that are called atmospheric water generator. I had never heard about those, but those machines were able to extract the humidity from the air and turn it into drinkable water using condensation technology. So it's not like a super new technology in the sense that you notice maybe in air conditioners, AC machines, there would be some water that also come out of the cooling down of the air.
Has been moved into a standard so that as many people can adopt it, and the costs go down for the hardware, and also the business models can evolve on a global scale, and frequency bands can be allocated accordingly. And also this new standard I'm talking about today, this DECT new radio standard, has a long history, and it has begun in Finland. And if you look at this picture, you can see our CTO here in this ice hole. And to let's say, to make a technology that you develop and bring it to a standard, it requires a lot of let's say a lot of ice baths, and this is his mother who's taking care that after 20 years of development, so he started this in the university, Wirepath as a company started the deployment of the technology in 2010, and we have been starting to standardize that in the year 2015. Yeah, so we have a 20-year history of this technology and already deployment of a couple of million devices in the field. So that's a pretty proven way of entering the standardization. And this is the mom of the CTO who is trying to make the technology discussions understandable for everybody that has an interest in the future IoT. And as we are again, and still unfortunately in an online session, in a webinar session, I know that the attention spans of these sessions is not so long. So I would like, instead of putting an agenda, putting the key takeaways that I would like to express and highlight in this presentation in the beginning. So first of all, I would like to see that to explain that the usage of air as a data transport medium, so we know it as wireless, requires rules based on these standards and regulation. And also, it should be clear after this presentation that 5G is a recognition process for future proofness of a technology. It's not a prescribed topology or a single technology. There is no 5G fits all, as it might appear sometimes in some presentations. And this standard, DECT New Radio Plus, is a radio interface technology designed for the massive type, machine type communication and ultra low latency communication of devices. Yeah. Applications can be deployed anywhere, and the standard can bring IoT deployments for many use cases, but it's up to you, the audience, and that's the impulse I want to set, to check if you have use cases in your mind, in your future plans that might fit to the framework that we are presenting here. There is no connectivity fits all, as said, and also no 5G. And finally, the DECT New Radio Plus is a European 5G standard, so it has been mainly contributors from the European industries like Nordic Semiconductor, Sennheiser, Wirepath from Finland in that case, and it has a potential to democratize IoT in near future. And I will explain today on the example of smart electricity metering what this could mean. Let me first elaborate a little bit on wireless connectivity standards and what they mean, these radio interface technologies that are standardized. In the end, it's about devices that enter a certain room, which we call a spectrum. And before entering this room, they must have a certain mindset in place, a certain set of rules, like we have today, the housekeeping rules to ask questions in the chat and so on. These devices all need to keep the rules that are set for this specific room. And the room is, in the end, the spectrum that is entered by this device. So taking this example of cellular versus this new DECT New Radio Plus, in the cellular space, you enter a room and you know you have to connect to a base station which is operated by an infrastructure provider or an operator, or your own network on the campus. So you need to comply to the rules this operator is setting, and these rules are globally standardized by an organization called 3GPP. On the other hand, you have in the DECT New Radio, you have a mesh architecture where you enter the room, and what you do is you scan your environment and you're looking for another device that is already in the room in order to share your information with, so that the data flows through these different people. It's like this children game of, I think it's called Chinese or Silent Whisper, Stille Post in German, where you are whispering your secret in the ear of your neighbor, and you're identifying the right neighbor to share your secret with, or to share your information with, so that you can create very dense networks of information sharing and information passing without overloading the room with the noise. So either you have a coordinator and you have to comply what the coordinator is saying to you before entering the room, which is prescribed in the standard, or you have a standard that is set of behavioral patterns that every device must comply. For example, not to shout around or kick other information out of the room. And this is, let's say, this definition of this radio interface is a very long and very tough work of people like you see here on the left-hand side, my colleague Jussi, and the other one is the colleague Juho. And you have here about 60 years of standardization experience in the picture, without counting the age of mom. And what it requires is a lot of expertise in order to understand how institutions work in combination with the technology that you need to describe and the proof points you have to bring. Then it's about the competence, as I said, and what else is needed is strong supporters. And with this DECT New Radio Plus, the strongest supporters were European regulators for telecommunication, like, for example, the German and Austrian regulators for spectrum and telecommunication. And it's hard work. But the main thing you need to do to create this is a lot of grit. So we started this initiative of standardizing Wirepas radio interface technology back in 2014 when Jussi Numinen, a veteran of standardization in 3GPP, joined our company and gave this quote, or he gives this quote today. He's also the vice chair of the TC DECT that created this standard for the technology side. And the question he was asking is, Wirepas had a great technology, so what spectrum could we access with it and how? And in what spectrum could anyone set up these wireless network services? And I'm elaborating a little bit on that in the course of this presentation. But how on earth this has become a 5G standard, and isn't 5G cellular? So let's elaborate, or let's get back a little bit on the history of on the let's say institutional background of what this 5G, 6G, 4G evolution means, or where it does come from. Initially, and that's the link also to EU Tech, what Alessandro said in the beginning. Initially, the ITU, the International Telecommunications Union, has created a department called another, let's say, a body that's called IMT, or a set of requirements that calls IMT. And every 10 years, this IMT is setting the requirements for the future telecommunication technology, and the requirements based on the sustainability goals of the United Nations. So we all love nature, and we all love to have a good future. And IoT and technology plays a crucial role in preserving and reaching these objectives. And every 10 years, that's why we are talking a lot about 6G today, because 6G process has started now as so-called IMT 2030. So we are defining today the requirements towards 6G technologies, which should be in place 2030. 2020, we are talking about the requirements that have been set or have been started to be set in the year 2010 and are now materializing. You see that the first rollouts of 5G networks are coming, and also new technologies are appearing on the horizon as DECT New Radio Plus. So this is the, let's say, the set of requirements that has been set by this IMT 2020 back in 2010 and has evolved over time. And it was clear that the future technologies require, let's say, three corner cases, or have three corner cases in order to help these sustainability goals to be reached. One is enhanced mobile broadband. So this means that we have really broadband wireless connectivity out there. The other one is ultra reliable, low latency communication. So let's say the corner case for that is self-driving cars, and how this communication between cars and between roads, for example, can happen in very short latency and very reliable, because we don't want to have accidents. And then what we focus on a bit today is this massive machine type communications, where let's say all these visions of 28 billion, 100 billion devices to be connected. In the end, everything that can be connected will be connected, as long as the data will create value at some application layer. And this is, let's say, the research that our CTO Wille started 20 years back, when he was thinking of what happens if the air interface is full and we cannot add additional devices to the same room. And so we have developed over the time improvements and solutions for that, and mesh networks are the natural topology for that. So we have now this requirement set by INT 2020, which we have here, based on the International Telecommunications Union, which is a department of the United Nations. And so far, the ITU is recognizing so-called RITS, radio interface technologies, as being future-proof for 5G. And in this case, 5G means that they can be used in any allocated spectrum as radio interface technology that is out there. So that's a modern or a future-proof technology that you can use in any of the spectrums, but literally it doesn't make sense to put, for example, DEC 2020 new radio in all spectrums of the 3GPP, where the 3GPP is, for example, setting mobile broadband connectivities. So you see here on this picture that DECT is really focusing on URLLC and MMTC, so low latency communication and massive machine type, very much on IoT, Internet of Things, and less on broadband connections. So you cannot stream Netflix movies in milliseconds through a mesh network. That's clear. The first implementation of this DEC 2020 new radio interface, or new radio plus as it's called now, is happening in the free 1.9 gigahertz spectrum, which is the legacy DECT spectrum. So as I said, the mobile industry is focusing very much, and that's absolute brilliant technology for mobile broadband and ultra reliable low latency of moving devices, like handovers to infrastructure and so on. That's great technology, but we are not talking about this today. And please do not compare on each item level these technologies, because they have a very different design principles behind. What we are focusing today is this DECT New Radio Plus, which is on the one hand covering ultra low latency communication and massive machine type, and I am today, let's say, giving examples more on the side of massive machine type communication requirements. So what is this design principle of DECT New Radio Plus? So why should we having this room of 1.9 gigahertz now entering with a different mindset inside the devices than, or behavioral pattern, than we usually do it with cellular devices? First of all, it's about anyone, anywhere, anytime. So anyone can deploy a network anywhere and anytime, and I explain why this is possible in a second, or how this was realized in a second. But this also means no one can prevent you from doing that in the dedicated free spectrum. Nowhere you can prevent it from doing that, apart, unfortunately, from China, where this band has been allocated to other technology. And at no time anybody can change the regulation behind it, because the frequency band is governed by the ETC DECT. And if the rules are set and accepted by the different radio regulators in the different geographies, there is no way, for example, like we see it in ISM bands, that over time the regulation changes the way that existing investments get stranded. And now let me just give you some background to how this, or what the standard is delivering. So first of all, the standard is agnostic, and agnostic means we are agnostic. It's agnostic to use cases. So you can deploy that and match that with your use case and with your needs as you like on the application level. But there is no killer application or application level layer that determines the connectivity, and vice versa. On the other hand, it's agnostic to business models. So there is no strong big player like we see in the cellular world, where the infrastructure or the telecom operator is in the end having a business model just by providing the connectivity. In the case of the DECT new radio, the devices form the network. So you are deploying your application with your devices and creating the network autonomously with your own application. And the standard is designed in a way that you can run several applications. You can share the frequency in parallel without planning the use of the spectrum, because that's inherent in the definition of the standard. So that's inherent in this behavioral pattern. You're always looking if somebody else is sending on the same channel, and if somebody is sending there, you're moving the channel to another one autonomously. Yeah? So there is a self-contained network that you can build, and there is no single point of failure in this network. There's high reliability built in, because we have let's say, taken over some very good technology from the cellular world, like for example HARC, in order to really keep the connections alive. And we also talk here about, for example, if we talk mesh networks, we talk about routing. So there are connections established between the devices. And we talk about a decentralized network. So there is no, as I said, no single point of failure, but decentralized also means that the devices themselves decide about what connections they take. And it's scalable. So you can reach with a high density, a CapEx-free coverage over huge areas. So we talk about cities, or we talk about campus, or huge plants. And there is a low or respectively no marginal cost for the connectivity after you have implemented that. As I said, the devices form the network, and in the standard they have been defined 4 types of devices. Yeah? It's a simple sensor device which is just sending the data. And if you talk about a star topology or a mesh network, this device is always at the edge of the network and it's just sending. It does not offer, like other devices that are forwarding devices, it does not offer to route data from other devices, but it's sending data. And in this case, we have a second configuration of devices, which is the devices can act as routers, as intermediate device, and that's creating the mesh network, the routing mesh network, as we have deployed them already in millions out there. Then there are gateway devices, which are exactly the same hardware and software than forwarding devices, but they are offering to the network, look, you can offload the data with me, and then we can bridge the device or bring the data to the system where you want to have it. And this backbone connectivity can, for example, be a LTE Cat M1 or LTE or cellular connection, can be a Wi-Fi connection or an Ethernet connection. So this gateway device just signals to the network, you can offload the data with me, so I'm taking off the traffic from the mesh network. But you can also deploy that locally with local service without getting into the internet or IP world, IPv6 world. And then it's bridging devices that are defined there, the devices that link multiple DECT new radio networks on the campus, for example. So there are multiple topologies possible in this standard, and I'm talking because we're coming from this angle, and these are the most complex networks to be built, is a decentralized mesh tree network with a routing mesh. So in that topology, there is a dynamic change of roles depending on the application and depending on the environment of the devices foreseen. So that means that, for example, a device that is not acting as a forwarding device or a router is autonomously deciding to become a send-only device just to save energy, for example, or to make the network more efficient in that case. Then there are 3 other topologies possible in this standard, which is point-to-point, point-to-multipoint, and star topologies, where the ultra-low latency use cases can be deployed. In these topologies, the devices likely will not change their role, as we described beforehand, during the application lifecycle, but they are, for example, if you have short distances between 2 devices or 2 sensors, or let's say take a mission critical application in the production where you need to stop a machine within milliseconds. There we talk about below millisecond potential data exchange between 2 points. So ABI Research and Nordic Semiconductor and ourselves have published recently a research paper, a white paper on this standard, and you see that there's plenty of possibilities, and it would be too much and too extensive for today in order to discuss every single item that's possible there or that's foreseen. What I will focus on right now is to show you what the standard delivers as a decentralized mesh network architecture in an unlicensed global and shared spectrum for the use case of smart energy metering. Because what we know is that smart metering as electricity smart metering is the use case that has been deployed around the globe in massive scale, and a lot of challenges have been solved and have been appeared around the connectivity of these smart meters. And let's say the technology platform or the connectivity platform decision in this use case is a multi-million-dollar investment decision in each case. And we are convinced that the technology or the standard that we are providing is an excellent fit. And I would deep a bit in the performance that the standard can deliver on this example use case, because it makes no sense to now throw tables of KPIs to you. So let's start with the DECT Radio Plus example technology for example, for smart metering. So you have, if you can see my picture, you have this kind of smart meter, and in a smart meter you usually have a standard interface for a network interface card, so that the meter itself can serve various connectivity technologies that are out there by just changing this standardized interface card. On this interface card you will have, or you can have, the DECT Radio Plus physical layer, meaning the modem, which is, by the way, the first one in the market will be on the hardware side, a LTE Cat M1 and Narrowband IoT chipset that is covering this band, but we are taking away all the firmware that is on it, and we are putting the firmware that is DECT Radio Plus compliant onto it. And if you have this protocol on this standard compliant protocol on this network interface card, the meter autonomously turns into a router in a mesh network. This means the installer goes out, installs it in the house, and it starts scanning its environment and seeing other meters or a gateway or a meter that is configured as a gateway around him, and he or she is then connecting to the one which is having the best so-called route cost in direction of the next possible gateway, or of the best possible gateway where this data can be offloaded. So this data of the smart meter will be hopping from this device to this device to this down to a meter. And the ratio between meters and gateways is dependent on the traffic that is created in the network. So the more traffic you create, the more you need to offload, the more gateways you need. But we are seeing ratios that are going in the area of 1 to 500 to 1 to 1,000 devices. So if you think in a cellular connectivity, so we are offloading a factor 500 to 1,000 connected devices from the cellular network by just using one cellular connection or one backbone connection in the network. You have the same data flow. There is the same amount of megabyte going into the backend systems, into the head-end systems of the smart meters, but the complexity of managing the connectivity is far lower, and also the cost. So I have followed the discussions about utilities and telcos in the last 15 years quite closely, And there was always this fight of utilities wanting to own their own spectrum in order to build their, let's say, their reliable communication and device networks for managing all the assets that are around the grid, and especially on the smart metering side, so to control the spectrum, to have their own. And the telcos, for good reason, said, no, we are paying for the spectrum, and why should you get a dedicated one for your use case? So what we have now in this new standard is that it comes with a dedicated spectrum in the 1.9 gigahertz, which is used by the legacy DECT as well. And this 1.9 gigahertz spectrum can only be entered with devices that act as friendly as I explained it beforehand. Yeah? So this means no risk of collision of collision of data, for example, or of applications that enter this space that can disturb the reliability of the connections that you build. So this is, I feel, a good compromise between the need for utilities for reliable connectivity and let's say the good reason for telcos to avoid having other industries running licensed spectrum. Unfortunately, this spectrum is not available in China and some parts of Southern America. I think Latin America, I think Peru has a special regulation here. But in the main markets, with some adaptations, and software adaptations, this spectrum is available. This whole radio interface allows fast and easy installation. And if you have followed smart metering rollouts over the last 20 years, you have seen that one KPI is very important, and that's the so-called cleaning rate. This means that if the installer installs the smart meter and the connectivity is not working at the first attempt, he's calling the Air Force in the end of the day, and then a second visit is needed towards this place. That happens frequently, and our experience in other frequency bands with this topology is that we are not needing this cleaning team, because the installer comes, installs the smart meter, and he's an electrician or she's an electrician, and she's not an expert in communications technology. And with this standard, with this self-contained network, this installation happens, or the commissioning happens super easy, because they are scanning their environment, they are finding a neighbor, they are telling the head-end system in the back end, I'm here, and once that happens, it's done. So there is no further need to, for example, provision SIM cards and stuff like that. Just the gateways or meters that act as a gateway, that's just adding a cellular connectivity inside every XYZ meter, requires a coverage with a mobile network. So coming to coverage, there are no black spots in that deployment. We are expecting ranges up to or over 2 kilometers outdoor and 100 meter indoor. That's the maximum range between two devices for reaching the coverage inside the networks. That's not the distance between a device and a gateway, that's the distance between two devices, and you can imagine how this network can then spread out. The good thing is that it's also made for density, or designed for density. So because especially in smart metering, you have situations where you have, on the one hand, villages like this, and then you have huge apartment buildings in cities where you have 10, 15 meters, 20 meters right next to each other in the basement. Yeah? And in order to have only one design, one technology deployed, it's important to have solved the density as well as the coverage issue. And for example, in this standard, there is defined that if you enter a room where you have a lot of density, a lot of devices around you, you're just drilling down your output power autonomously, yeah? Which means your radio range is limited, can be limited to even a couple of centimeters, so that you only see the 5 devices, 10 devices around you, and then decide how you build this network. It's a bit like this Hoberman sphere, where you can really put this very dense or you can expand the network to large distances. So also we have high meter to gateway ratio, as I said, and multi-gateway architecture is foreseen in this network, as well as resulting in the lowest maintenance possible. Because once this is up and running, only a power cut can stop the meter from sending data. Also, things like let's say common things like like bidirectional communications, over the air updates, and no single point of attack or failures are built in the standard, but it needs to be deployed appropriately. So we can only define the network layer security and the network layer protection, and not the application layer. That's then subject to the development of the solution. Okay, sometimes we need to differentiate. So there are no recurrent subscriptions, there are no spectrum license fees, and no network management fees for this standard, because your devices that you are owning and deploying, either as a general contractor or as a utility or as a meter vendor, whatever role you're taking in this business model, is building the network, and so you are responsible for the service level when you're using the standard and deploying the protocols appropriately. As an example here, this, as I said, Wirepass has been working the last 20 years on this topic of meshed networks. More than 50 utilities in the Nordics have deployed Wirepass mesh networks for smart metering on a dedicated band that is allocated to the utilities over there for the metering. It's 868, 870 in at least in Norway, and we are also deploying on the dedicated band in India, 865 megahertz. But as you see, these products. I'm ready in a minute. Yeah. So all these products that have been developed for this market cannot be one-to-one deployed in other markets. So there is a lot of, let's say, adaptation also on for example, our side to be done, and still it's proprietary. So we are now moving this to a standard, and the benefits, as I said, is good coverage, and the experience in Norway, for example, shows 99% of service level and even more. Yeah. The good thing, or the largest network is 920,000 electricity meters, and you can really contact me when you want to have more details about that. This is the topology of this network. I think it's Oslo. It's the biggest network that is currently operated, and on the transport and routing layer, the transport and routing layer for this standard requires compliance. So Wirepass as a company has one of these transport protocols available, but anyone out there can build his own transport protocol, and on top of this transport protocol, you can run these application protocols, and there the interfaces are clearly defined. So we are now discussing, for example, to integrate DLMS protocol into a reference design, reference application for the standard. The same happens, for example, or can happen, for example, with smart building application layers like Matter, former Zigbee. So it's a versatile standard which requires the collaboration of all people who see the value that this connectivity can bring a boost to the business in their respective segments. So we're talking smart buildings, we're talking smart tracking, and so on. Yeah. So what I would like to do is to invite you to join the ride. And you see that Bluetooth Low Energy, and some of our developers have been already developing Bluetooth Low Energy when it was not a standard, was in the similar situation 15 years ago. And it created a big momentum for this low power point-to-point connection market. Yeah, you see where it stands today. Together, we can make this NR Plus standard for the standard for a European 5G. So I feel Europe needs a footprint in the 5G market, and it's exactly this decentralized, democratized way of building networks. And feel free to partner with us. That I feel the standard is much bigger than Wirepass or the contributors to the standard that have been in place, and we can make this a real innovation platform for the IoT, for use cases that have not been flying as expected in the last 10 years. Thanks a lot, and happy to take your questions and entering the discussion.
Thank you very much, Thomas. That was an excellent overview about this topic. So very pleased to have you here in that talk. There is one technical question already in the chat, but I think it's better than if you take that directly from Aviral. And the other one from Gregory, I will include in the panel. But at first, I like to open the panel a little bit by just jumping over to Ulf Samer that we have here in the panel. Ulf is already known here because he was participating in digital events already. So I'm happy also to have you here. Ulf is the CTO at Induo, so to be precise, and has a lot of experience in the whole area of IoT, and especially in the area of communication in IoT. And I like to open that discussion asking you, so what is your view on that? So is there a place for this technology that we were talking about now? And what is, following the goals of UTech, is there a market? Are there solutions that need this technology? So perhaps you give us your vision on that in a few words.
Yes, absolutely. I think there are a lot of sort of use cases that make sense for this technology, meaning that it is a democratized technology, so it can be used without the cellular structure, but at the same time, it's meant for the short-range communication. And one benefit of short-range communication is that it consumes less power, and the way the technology is built also makes it very reliable, I would say. So I'm really, really thrilled to see this development, to be honest.
Okay, so I think you have to check your connection. The sound was not so good. I will jump also to Alex to welcome him here in this round. So Alex is also a member here in our council, our alliance for a longer time as a board member, and he's with Pilar. And I would like to take you into the discussion, as I would call you an expert in the area of security and what's all around of that topic. So did you have a view, a look on this technology coming from that side to give us a hint on are there topics that we have to look at specifically regarding security?
Yeah, first of all, thank you, Thomas, for this unique presentation. I was just blown away by how far you have come. And it's like we are building a mesh technology ourselves, and it's like an incredible achievement what you guys did. It's like really, really awesome. A few questions are still there. It's like about the authentication of the devices and the users. So the decentralized network must have a security measure to connect each other on a very good connection purpose, so everybody is secure and safe and everybody is authenticated. That I don't know if you already said it, but it doesn't seem like it right now.
So yeah, I to unmute, and I have a big B around. So if I shift,
okay.
Sorry for that. So on the security side, the standard is defining minimum requirements around having network keys and device authentication. So every device has its own address, has its own ID, and on the network layer, sorry for that, I have it's crazy. You don't hear it, but you can see it. So on the network layer, we are implementing a minimum AES 128 ciphering for the encryption, for the exchange of the keys in order to connect, and there are mechanisms built in so that you can do in-band provisioning, and as every device is subject to OTA, to over-the-air updates for the application layer as well as for the connectivity layer, the keys can be exchanged and managed remotely depending on the application, depending on the implementation, and depending on the system architecture that you are about to deploy. You can imagine that smart metering companies are putting a lot of effort in securing their networks, and especially as on the let's say device level. And as Germans, we are threatened by these security discussions since months.
Yes. Maybe a quick follow-up question. You talked about decentralized network. How do devices know what is a trustworthy communication partner for connection purpose?
So
do you guys decide that, or is it like in this decentralized network embedded?
It's embedded in the decentralized network. So,
okay,
so
that's perfect.
You can control. Yeah. It's not. The Wirepass is not deciding anything in this.
Okay, that's perfect.
Term of that you need us explicitly to run a standardized NR+ network. No.
Okay, so I like to take this point of hardware and sensors in the network. So we had a question here from Gregory, asking looking from Wirepass to hardware. So he's asking, are you able to also integrate different other hardware into that network, and to look from the other side, so from the network side? So is it, as you mentioned, I understood it as an open network where every device is able to be integrated. Is that correct?
But it will not be an open network where you can just come with your meter and look if there is another device from another vendor, from another owner around, and you can automatically connect. You need to have the right to connect to this device by this, for example, network keys and authentication methods. But there can be, and that's the novelty, a plethora of networks parallel in the same room. Yeah, and these would only how you say, this would recognize each other, these networks, as another traffic, but they cannot connect. Yeah, so you can run several solutions and applications in the same city, in the same network, in the same frequency, and the risk of collision of packets, for example, of data loss, is very, very, very minimized because of the rules that are set by this standard. And on the other hand, and that's avoiding the problem we are having today in this open frequency bands, where you have only a limited set of rules, like for example 2.4 gigahertz, where a lot of traffic from different topologies and different technologies and radio access is happening between Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, Zigbee, proprietary, and so on. There we learned as a Wirepass mesh very much how this radio access needs to be designed. This is what we have standardized. This is a lot of IP moved into the standard. And on the hardware side, we are relying, there's no Wirepass hardware. The hardware that we are using, and I can say that in the beginning, is a standard product from Nordic called NRF 9160, which is a off-the-shelf modem. In the 2.4 gigahertz, we are using off-the-shelf Bluetooth chipsets. It's just that you have to wait to take away the firmware that is coming with the Bluetooth, so that you have a very low bill of material, or the same level of bill of material that you have, for example, for LTE-M or for NB-IoT today. But tomorrow, and that depends on the evolution of the standard, the more demand is coming, the more incentive is there for chipset designers to design a dedicated chip for this topology, for this standard. And for sure, there will be, especially on the URLLC side, also evolutions on transport protocols that are not Wirepass. And we are encouraging this because we also like to have, let's say, low power and low cost hardware available in the market, where we can run then our sweet spot applications.
Okay.
Let's say application areas.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. I like to encourage everybody to put in questions here in the public chat. I will take that and guide it to the right person. So feel free to put in whatever you like to know about that. So I like to use Ulf, you as a person with an overview about a lot of solutions in that area. So can you give us a clue on which areas might be the right areas to use this technology. So we heard a little bit about that and some examples from Thomas, but to open the discussion in the way of, hey, here's a new idea, we can use it there in this use case too. Do you have ideas in that area?
Yes, and I hope my sound is better now.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Good, good. So I think the 5G standards and if you look at massive machine type communication, the focus is on low range applications. And if you look, for example, inside buildings, there are a lot of things that could be enabled in buildings, but also I see that the technology can be used in quite large scale in industrial sectors as well. And I think the standard is in itself very attractive using the mesh technology, and it has a very high integrity. So I would really say that there are a lot of these applications where you normally would use other kind of wireless technologies, but you can for sure look at this technology as a very good fit and alternative.
Okay.
So and also of course the sensor market is it's massive and it's going to grow a lot in the near future.
Okay, so thank you for that. So the first that I ever heard about this technology was these use cases in rural areas where we don't have connectivity. And I know about a test scenario in Australia where electric cars were connected by a mesh network because you hadn't a network to gather information about what's happening to the individual car. So what you say is there are much more areas where we can use it, buildings or agriculture are examples for that.
Yes, and yeah. So, and sorry, Thomas, for interrupting. I think that what Thomas is also implicating here is that the technology, if interest is right from the market, is going to be at a very attractive price level. So that means that you have no cost for the subscription, and you'll have a hardware that is decently priced. So that means that this can definitely use. It could be used for scaling IoT in a lot of different projects.
Okay, perfect. So
maybe to complement Jörg, we have this ABI paper where a lot of use cases beyond metering are described around industry, asset tracking, condition monitoring, and so on. So that's where the advantages and let's say where the advantages or the possibilities of this standard are described a bit more in detail.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that just
link in the presentation.
Yeah, thanks. So brings me to the next question. So regarding Ulf already mentioned production areas where you have in the moment different field bus protocols that are active. So how does this new standard relate to these existing standards, wired standards? Do they just mix up with that and you can use both, or is it vice versa? So how does that relate to existing other standards?
As I showed in one of my last pictures, we must distinguish between application layer protocol standards like DLMS, OPC UA, and so on. Those can, and this is then subject of the industries to let's say, to build a reference implementation or a reference design on top of the standard for or reference middleware for these protocols. So where you then define the message content and message sizes and so on, because the network doesn't really care what is in the payload, what is written in the, let's say, in the content that is transported. That's a very clear distinguishment. We are taking care of the transport, but not of the content. And in that case, on it's subject to the industries to investigate whether their protocol layer standards like OPC UA, Profinet, Modbus, and so on can be adopted on top of this mesh standard. And then it's an economic decision what kind of devices you still wire, what kind of devices you connect wireless, but on the system level interoperability of on the application layer, you can put all this together in the backbone. But it requires work, and it requires development of additional, let's say, interfaces between the standards, the connectivity standard on the one hand, on the application layer standard on the other hand.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'd like to take the chance also, Thomas Kanzler just jumped in again. So to place a question in your direction as a representative of A1, a classical provider, centralized provider of communication. How do you relate to these new standards, these new ways of communicating? You open up the session with, hey, we need communication. How is someone like A1 looking at that?
From a very broad level. So I need to take care of what I'm saying right now. Now we have on one hand, of course, this huge advertising of the 5G in general, right, to make it understandable for the people outside, right, especially also for the residential people as well. And on the other side, we are looking very, very deeply into these standards, and also with partners, right? For example, Nordic Semiconductors and so on. But also we are in exchange with Thomas Weishaupt, right? So I connected him with our main product manager. So we are always scouting. We need to be prepared, to say it in a nutshell. And then I have my private beliefs I cannot share with you now, what I think will be successful technology or frequency in the futures or not, right? So for example, also let's throw a question back to you, Thomas Weishaupt. Hopefully the question was not there, but when we talk about 450, somehow I did not really understand, or I do not really know, is this successful now? Is it progressing? Can you give us a little, sorry for putting this back, but because I really don't have an idea. Will this have a future? Yeah, is this important? Just a few questions to you, Thomas.
Yeah, I cannot judge other technologies, but there are frequency bands that have been, let's say, allocated to utilities in Europe in some let's say regions, like I think Germany, Netherlands, and also Austria, which is the 450 megahertz band, which has some specifics. And this standard we are discussing here has not been specified yet for this band. Has been specified for I think it's going from 1.3 gigahertz down to 6 gigahertz bands. There you have specifications and technical details in the standard documents. But the 450 is some, there we are running in exactly this problem that you have a very limited number of connections that need to be served for example, utilities, connecting windmills or connecting smart meters with a very old technology called CDMA in Netherlands. And then the question is the future proofness. Do we have hardware? Do we have chipsets available in the near and longer future that serve this frequency band with the let's say connectivity standards or with the connectivity protocols that are used there? Because we already see that there is a versatility of connectivity protocols that are not interoperable, which require different chipsets, which require different infrastructures. And I don't feel that this will be very, very successful. So it might be a niche for some, let's say, high-end applications like connecting windmills on the offshore side, but it's not, I haven't seen too much success outside Netherlands smart metering to get this into scale. And that it's about the cost. And as a network provider in the utility space, is always getting his cost back from the energy buyer. The motivation to not do something by his own is maybe not so elaborated.
Yeah.
But my feeling is that it's not so. They should at least look at this standard and at the 1.9 gigahertz band for their own operations as well, and then take it from there.
Yes. And back to the question you raised to me, Jörg, is so we of course we're offering connectivity, but basically our customers come to us for whole IoT solutions, basically, right? And every use case is different. Smart meter, whatever, smart manufacturing, latency, all these things you heard already today, yeah. And then this is why we need to be very broad, right? From our connectivity solutions, and also sometimes it means that, for example, niche connectivity solutions, yeah, you need to skip basically. You say we don't do it, right? It's not our niche also. So this is basically what we are doing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I just put down another question. Perhaps I can bring in Alexander here again. So, but I don't think that is your home base. But what about energy consumption in that communication? So, I read a lot about discussing about more energy consumption by 5G because the devices need more energy to send out data. By that, we should relate also this technology of DECT NR Plus to that. So perhaps you can jump into that discussion with Thomas about what about energy consumption of this communication? What are we allowed to use there, and how long should sensors be able to communicate?
Yeah, totally. More likely is for me, it would be more interesting to know how long is the lifespan of the sensors of your product, and what can your massive mesh type communication provide with to make sure it works quickly and securely on that level, so that you don't have the issue of the high cost of providing this 5G network. Was it clear what I meant?
Yeah, I try to give an answer, or let's say give an impulse on that. So I can give you the example of our technology in the 2.4 gigahertz band, where we have managed, or where the protocol enables sensors and devices to operate as a router for data with a 30 microamp power consumption in average. Yeah? So and still having a very good throughput. And many parts of this, let's say, underlying principles that led to this low power consumption for these routers have been entered into the standard. Yeah? It would go too deep in the technology to elaborate now. And we are expecting for this standard also to have, let's say, very low power applications, or very low power consumption on the router level and on the device level, depending on the role of the device. But it also depends on the system architecture. So how often do you need data? How much data do we need to transfer, and so on. So the mesh network is always, the power consumption is always dependent on the topology that you deploy in the field, but you can calculate that upfront. That also depends on, let's say, in the end, power consumption relies on how much power does the sender and receiver of a radio device consume, and how long is it on air. That's literally the two items to look at. And in the beginning, we are talking, in the first deployment that we are talking now about the smart metering, power is not the big focus. So that's because of the existing underlying hardware, Nordic NRF 9160. And we are expecting in the second and third generation, in the second and third release of our transport layer, to lower the consumption massively to the levels of what we have seen in the Bluetooth or in the sub-gigahertz area. But we need to discuss that depending on the use case, depending on the topology, depending on the application layer. So there's no one size or one answer fits all, but we expect lifetimes of several years for battery operated devices.
Okay, so leads me to the last question, Thomas Weishaupt, that I want to place on your desk is about, you mentioned a little bit about which companies are developing radio chips to support this network, this communication layer. So out of this standardization process, do you have a view on that? Are a lot of these semiconductor producers jumping on that technology? What can we see there in the near future?
So that's to be honest, that's pretty intransparent to us, to me at the moment, because the physical layer definition of how a hardware should look like is defined in the standard, so anyone can start without consulting us, for example. And it's a chicken and egg problem. So if you have a lot of interest in the future deployment, so that's why these application protocol of the institutions that run application layer or protocol standardization, like Matter or OPC UA or others, or DLMS. So if they advocate the standard, they raise the interest of additional chipset vendors to develop a chipset, and then it's bypass another transport protocol and transport protocol and routing protocol vendors to migrate to this chipset, which is then also an economic decision. But let's say it like this: I'm pretty sure there are companies and big companies in the semiconductor area that are thinking about it, and especially the initiative of the Europeans to let's say to support European chipset developments are also a little bit focused on this new standard.
Okay, so I would say thank you very much again, Thomas, to you for opening this this topic by your keynote and the open discussion about what can be the usage, what can be the future of that. Thank you to all the panelists, Alexander, Thomas, and Ulf, for participating here. So we're, of course, everybody is available via LinkedIn or whichever channel you find us. So don't hesitate to ask questions if there is anything going on there and you have questions there. So thank you very much to everybody here in the round, and I hand over to Alessandro to give a little bit of closing words to our session. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jörg, and thank you, Thomas, and all the other panel. That was really interesting. Really interesting. I'm waiting for a future where I just buy a product and I don't have to worry about the network, because this product will just connect to a network, and I don't have to worry about a SIM card. I don't have to worry about a Wi-Fi connection, but it's just simply connected. I can talk the same as we are talking in English. As long as we speak English, we can talk to each other. And the same, I buy an object, open it, connect it to the power line, give it to power, and then it's a live object. And so I'm waiting for this. I think it will be very, very short. Yeah, not so far in the future. That would be great.
Maybe you find it first in the metaverse than in the reality. But yeah.
yes. We can do the metaverse, of course. Yes. Anyway, it was very, very interesting. I mean, it opens up really interesting options, and to have this free band that we can use for IoT technology. So I would like to thank Thomas Marshall for his very nice presentation. And as usual, yes, I don't know if you can see my screen on my presentation. As usual, as the European Technology Chamber, we thanked our speakers, in this case today, Thomas, for his efforts with the 3 certificates. As you know, I mean, we are in the UTech, we are really very careful about the environment and the SDGs and the SDGs and so on. And we do have a program in Africa to plant trees on the name of our speaker, just as a thank you. And so this is a certificate, which is a numbered certificate done by our chairman, Florian von Tucher, of a tree planted in Africa, by us. So I would like to reassure Thomas that he will not need to fly to Africa to water his tree. We will take care of it. And with that, I hope that you enjoyed our session as well, and hope we can stay in touch and connect again to our next event, which, if I'm not wrong, is on the 20th of May. On the 3rd Friday of every month, we have our IoT Alliance digital event. So thank you so much, and wish you a nice weekend to all. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Have a nice weekend.
Bye.
Bye bye. Thank you very much.
Thanks.